It's time for Watts on Wealth Radio with Barry Watts and your host, Ralph Hipp.
Welcome in. According to a new Axios Ipsos poll, 1 of every 5 Americans believe they'll never retire. 62% of people who are not retired yet believe Social Security won't even cover half of their expenses, and only 1/3, 33% on the nose, have a written financial plan. That's on the low side. Of course, there are some simple steps you can take to gauge your preparedness to be retired, and it's as easy as checking off the boxes on our retirement checklist we'll do today. We're going to help you check off some of the items on the list in this weekend's Watts on Wealth show. Hi, this is Ralph Hipp, all set to introduce J. Barry Watts, the main retirement designer of the Wealthcare Corporation. Hello, Barry.
Hey, Ralph, how are you today?
Very good, very good. All in a festive holiday mood here and ready for the new year, ready to get going here.
Let's get after it and let's have a great 2024.
Absolutely. Yeah, with all the stuff that's been going on, things may be looking on the bright side. We'll see how 2024 shapes up. Barry, to get the show started today, how do you help determine just how prepared a new client in the Ozarks is to be retired?
Well, there are multiple steps to retirement readiness, Ralph. The first, of course, is financial readiness. And that is, I think, what everybody thinks that we are talking about when you ask that question. But there's also the psychological readiness. Are you ready to not be going to work every day and seeing your buddies and doing the things you do and going through the process and steps of the day that you're accustomed to? There's emotional readiness. Can you be done and no longer be you in whatever that role you played was in all those years? And then there's relational readiness. You know, Ralph, your wife may not be ready for you to retire, and it could be your retirement is a challenge to your relationship at home. So there's a lot more to it than just financial. Now, we help people mostly with just financial readiness, but it's important to understand that these other aspects are a part of it. In fact, I tell people that it's just as important to know what you're retiring to as it is to know what you're retiring from.
Yes, indeed. Well, if you think you're ready to pull the switch there, get on that phone first of all and have Barry help you navigate your way through that. The phone number is 417-200-3500 right there in the Ozarks or wherever you're listening to our show. So as I mentioned, Barry, on the show today, we have this retirement checklist to go through, and we've broken it down to a few key categories. They are, and I'll go one at a time here, income, then your healthcare costs, managing your risk, tax-efficient strategies, and of course, toward the end there, legacy and estate planning. So each of these is very important.
Well, they are important, Ralph, and each of those is addressed in our proprietary retirement planning process at the Wealthcare Corporation. We call that the 6 steps to retirement confidence. And each of those steps is designed to deal with one of the things that you just mentioned in your last piece there.
Well, first of all, when it comes to your income, the first few boxes you need to check involve your budget, having a written budget, and an estimate of the income you'll need each year when you retire. So I know you've talked about your sitting on the porch money, Barry, on the program before. Talk about how you know if you've saved enough to cover all your anticipated expenses when you retire.
Well, let's start with the assignment you just gave people that they don't appreciate, Ralph. I've seen people turn a deaf ear to me before.
Yeah.
And when you start mentioning written budgets, you kind of get a deaf ear because people aren't interested in budgeting. Now, functionally, we all have a budget because you can't spend more than you make. You're not the United States government. You're you, and you can only spend as much as you make. And so you have a cap on your spending related to how much money you're making. And so if you don't have any other way of knowing what you spend per month, one way we back ourselves into that is by asking how much money are you making each month? And do you have money left over to go into savings, or are you spending it all? And now we kind of know how much you're spending a month. But you asked the question, how do you know if you saved enough to cover those expenses? And Ralph, that's, if I may suggest, kind of a backwards question, because your question is focused on an amount of money. You know, $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, whatever the number is. I'm going to suggest to you that the amount of money isn't really critical. It's the amount of income that's critical. Mm-hmm. And what people don't know how to do is they often don't know how to turn their money into income, and they stumble on that step right there. And it's one of the things that we specialize in at the Wealth Care Corporation, is turning lump sums of money into guaranteed income throughout a retirement lifetime. And so the question really is, how much income am I going to need to spend each month, and how much income do I have coming in? And I will tell you, not everybody thinks realistically about this. We had a case just yesterday where I don't remember the exact numbers, but they wanted something like $8,000 a month in retirement income. And when we figured out how much they could have each month and not run out of money, they can only have about $5,000 a month. And yet their heart is set on this $8,000 figure. And I've got to deliver that bad news next week when I meet with them. And we'll see how that goes. But it's important to think realistically. And if you don't know how to think about it, that's okay. Just say, hey, Barry, I don't know how to think about this. Coach me a little bit. And I'm happy to step in and do that, because this is what we do every day for clients of the Wealth Care Corporation.
Oh, great. So first of all, also, Barry, we need to take an inventory of our sources of income and how they will be taxed. A lot of us can probably fill in that first blank. We know our pension total and our Social Security. I know both of mine by heart. But how do we know how or if those will be taxed, and to what extent?
Well, it'd probably be safe, Ralph, just to assume they will be.
Let's just go with it.
Yeah, just plan on it. So here's kind of the way it works. If you take Social Security before full retirement age, which for anyone who was born after 1960, age 67 is full retirement age.
Right.
If you take Social Security before full retirement age, what's called FRA, well, you give up $1 for every $2 you earn above $22,320. So if you were planning on getting a job driving the tram down at Silver Dollar City, or gassing up boats at Watts Up dock up at the lake, or something like that, you just need to be aware, if you make more than $22,000, you start giving your Social Security back. Now, if you are single and you earn more than $34,000 in total income, or married more than $44,000, you're going to pay taxes on 85% of your Social Security income. And here's a little fly in the ointment for you. To get to that $34,000 number, or that $44,000 number, 50% of your Social Security counts toward the $34,000 or the $44,000 number. So just be aware as you're tallying up your income from, a little part-time job, and, I mow the neighbor's yard and they pay me $20, and I do a little of this and a little of that, and I fix things down at the church for them once in a while and they pay me for that. When you tally it all up, if your income is more than $44,000 married, $34,000 single, then you're going to pay tax on 85% of your Social Security income. That doesn't mean that you pay 85% of your Social Security in tax. No, it just means $85 out of every 100 that Social Security sends you will be subject to taxation at whatever your personal tax rate is, which is based on your overall income rate. And it may interest you to know that more than half of retirees pay taxes on Social Security. So it's pretty safe for me to say, well, just plan on it, because for many people that'll be the case. But Ralph, I've got something special for you.
What's that?
If you plan carefully enough, and this is something we do for our clients at the Wealth Care Corporation, it is possible, not guaranteed by any means for everyone, but it is possible, and we see it happen fairly frequently, to be in the 0% tax bracket in retirement. We have about a third of our clients who are in the 0% tax bracket. And that doesn't mean they're poor. No, you could have $1 million a year in income and still be in the 0% tax bracket if you have structured your income properly to come from the proper sources. And that requires planning in advance. You can't just jump off the train into retirement and expect that to happen. You have to plan for it. But it's kind of exciting when somebody's living a great 6-figure lifestyle and they're in the 0% tax bracket. That's something to celebrate.
Well, that's awesome. We didn't even know that was possible. But some of the sage wisdom of Barry Watts, the main retirement designer with the Wealth Care Corporation, and Watts on Wealth, the radio home for expert retirement planner J. Barry Watts. We're glad you're with us. Maybe listening to our show for the first time, and if you are, welcome. Well, the other piece that we can't overlook, Barry, when we're creating an inventory of those income and assets is to inventory those debts. How important is it to make sure we have a handle on those income liabilities?
Well, obviously, Ralph, you need to know what you owe. Because if you don't know what you owe, then you probably don't know how deep a trouble that you're in. I'll tell you this, I'm uncomfortable with anyone retiring with debt, unless it's real estate debt. If you still have a mortgage and you have enough income coming in to meet all your needs and pay your mortgage, I'm still okay with that. But if you've got other kinds of debt, I see people, we don't really see them in our practice. I read about and hear about people who still have student loan debt and they're in their 60s. And I don't have a category for that. It blows my brain up.
Really? Student loan debt at 60?
Well, I went all the way through college and didn't have a student loan. Now I had some great scholarships and mom and dad took good care of me, and college didn't cost very much. I went to the University of Missouri for something like $3,000 a semester, I think.
Back in the day. Yeah,
if
me
I
too.
recall.
Yeah.
But it's all changed since then. So the point is you ought to have your debts eliminated. And there's a very important debt that many people have forgotten about, Ralph. We hurry to pay off our house. Oh, I wouldn't want to have a house payment once I retire. That's what some people say. We hurry to pay off our house. But did you know, Ralph, that your IRA has a mortgage on it?
Oh.
When I tell people that, they look at me like I'm stupid. And then they go,
oh, explain that.
What are you talking about? Well, when you've got a mortgage on your house and somebody asks, so do you own your house? You say, yes, I own my house. Well, me and the bank. And that means I've got a mortgage. So here's the question. Do you own your IRA? Well, what a stupid question. Of course I own my IRA. Well, me and the IRS, because about a third of what you have in your IRA account actually is money that belongs to the Internal Revenue Service that they just haven't taken yet. And so just as it's important to pay off the mortgage on your house, I teach retirees that it's important to pay off the mortgage on your IRA, and we show people how to do that when we work with them at the Wealth Care Corporation.
Oh, that is great. Barry's number is 417-200-3500 right there in the Ozarks for the Wealth Care Corporation. Barry, I hadn't realized it, but when you spell out the IRS, it spells theirs. Did you know that?
Yeah, it does.
How much of that is theirs? The IRS. We're talking about your retirement checklist, especially for 2024. To go through this, make sure all your ducks are in a row. Another box to check on, Barry, is the retirement checklist, and that the strategy is adjusted for inflation. Help us check that off, and how do we factor that in?
Well, a lot of people don't factor it in, and it's a super big mistake. And that's the thing about inflation. Inflation is sneaky. It costs $100 to do something this year. Next year, it costs $103, and I can't really remember what it cost last year. It seems like it was about the same. It was $100. From 100 to 103 is not a big deal. From 103 to 106 is a big deal. But you do that for enough years, and suddenly, instead of it costing $100 to do something, it costs $130 to do something, and now that became a big deal. So inflation is sneaky. And people often don't factor it in because they either don't realize they should have, they don't know how to, they just tend to forget about it. So when we're doing retirement income plans for people, and we believe it's important that you have a plan for every year of retirement, how much income you'll be receiving and spending in that year. Well, we always set those expenses to go up by 3% every year going forward. And it's a really big, hairy math problem. If you are mathematically inclined and you like spreadsheets, you can do a lot of this yourself, but most people aren't and don't. And we have special retirement planning software that helps make this easy for us. So I would suggest that if it's not something that you're really comfortable with, you should probably let a professional retirement planner help you with that. And of course, a retirement planner is different than an investment manager because many people have got people who are managing their investments. But when you start talking to them about taxes, you start talking to them about how to factor in inflation and guarantee income over a retirement lifetime, they quickly get lost and say, hey, dude, I don't know how to do that, but I can buy you some more investments.
That's right.
So hook up with a professional retirement planner. If it's not us at the Wealth Care Corporation, find someone that you have confidence in and let them help you.
Well, we hope it is the Wealth Care Corporation, and Barry's number, once again, is 417-200-3500. We're glad you're with us on the show. Barry, time for a little commercial break here, and you're not going anywhere, right? And folks, you don't go anywhere.
I'll be waiting to see your smiling face.
we will indeed, even on the radio, and we'll be back right after this.
What does your dream retirement look like? While you're busy thinking about that, why not let Barry and his team help you come up with a plan to help you achieve those dreams? Call 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500. More Watts on Wealth after this.
Imagine for a moment that an intense storm is pounding your house. Will your roof leak? Will the siding peel away? Will your basement flood? If your house is properly built and maintained, you'll be fine. But what about your 401k or your investments? The stock market has had a pretty good run the last few years, but is its current turmoil making you feel uneasy? Are you confident your portfolio is built to weather a financial storm? Now may be a great time to get a second opinion on your retirement plan. Call Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare at 417-200-3500 now. They'll examine your portfolio and show you if your investments are in need of some weatherproofing. Call Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare today at 417-200-3500 to get your no-obligation second opinion. Don't let your retirement get caught in the rain. Call 417-200-3500. Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk.
You're listening to Watts on Wealth with Barry Watts of WealthCare. If you have questions about what you heard on the show today, you can give Barry and his team a call at 417-200-3500.
Welcome back in, and along with J. Barry Watts of the WealthCare Corporation, this is your host, Ralph Hipp. We're talking about income analysis through the WealthCare Corporation. If you're worried about being able to afford being retired, you're not alone. The Ipsos poll we're talking about on the program today also tells us, Barry, 1 of every 5 Americans believe they'd never retire. And Charles Schwab's latest Modern Wealth Survey says just one third have a written financial plan. We're going to go over more of that. So that means nearly 70% of us do not have any written financial plan. That's got to worry us.
Well, Ralph, I think that number is specious, I believe would be the word they use. I don't think it's as high as 70%. I'll tell you that virtually 0% of the people who I see in my practice have a written financial plan, and none of them have an income plan. So I question whether it's as high as 30%. But nevertheless, Chuck Schwab says it's 30%, and I'll take him at his word. By the way, I got a picture sent to me the other day from my friend and your friend in Washington, Congressman Eric Burleson.
Yeah,
it just pops up on my phone, and there's this picture of Eric standing with his arm around this guy. And I'm like, okay, what is this? I don't know.
And who is this?
And so I'm like, okay, who is it? And he says, it's Charles Schwab. Oh, well, silly me. We do business with Charles Schwab every day. But Chuck doesn't exactly answer the phone. It's somebody who works for him. So I didn't recognize Charles Schwab when he was in Washington talking to the congressman. So let me help connect some dots for you about being able to afford retirement and how to think about income.
Okay.
Ralph. So if you're worried that you haven't saved enough, or that you're not going to be able to retire and you don't have a written financial plan that proves something out differently to you, I'm going to suggest to you that you will feel better. You'll feel more financially stable if you have it planned out and in writing that you can reference back and check back against and see how you're keeping out. So if you want to be one of those people who doesn't have to worry about if your money is going to last and whether or not you can afford to retire, then you need to create an income strategy. And at our place, we start with what we call the 6 steps to retirement confidence. And the first of those steps is income to age 100. Ultimately, when you go through all of those steps, you're able to be confident in what your retirement looks like going forward. And it allows you to ease up and relax and maybe even turn in the yellow slip that says, I quit. And that's an important thing to be able to do. So what I want to say to you, Ralph, is we want to help people figure out how much they're going to need in retirement for the retirement that they've been dreaming about. Here's a funny one. People come in, you ask them that question, how much they're going to need. And they're like, oh, well, we just don't spend any money at all. I think we can get by on $1,500 a month. Well, first of all, that's bogus. You can't get by on $1,500 a month. But so I asked them, start telling me about it. So what do those expenditures represent? Well, we spend $200 a week at the grocery store, and the utility bill is $30. Well, and that's it. And they haven't given any thought to all the other things that they're spending money on. I mean, if the Springfield News Leader drops a newspaper on your doorstep each morning, that doesn't happen as much anymore. You're paying for that. If you are hooking up to the internet to get your news, you're paying for that somewhere to Mediacom or whoever it happens to be that provides your internet connection for you. You've got medical costs that are in there. Somebody's having to be sure and keep the oil changed on your car and keep it gassed up. You've got taxes at the end of the year that you're having to pay and income taxes that you're having to pay. The point is, you need to pay attention and really keep track about how much you're spending. And then when we talk about your retirement dreams, some people want to spend extra in their retirement dreams because they're going to take the trip they've always dreamed about, do the thing they've always dreamed about. And by the way, I think it's important. I just gave this advice to a young couple in their 40s not an hour ago, sitting in my conference room. I think it's important to, with your family, to build memories. I think building memories is more important than passing on wealth.
Oh, absolutely.
And we were talking about the expense of that because Kelly and I've got a trip planned for next summer, and the kids aren't going on this trip. If you saw how much it cost, you'd know why the kids aren't going on this trip.
You budgeted that out, didn't you?
Kind of taking my breath away. My mom and dad are going with me on this trip, and mom just made sure that dad can't know the numbers. And I think that's probably a good decision on her part.
Very good. Yep.
But the point is, we want to figure out what is it that you're dreaming of in retirement and how do we fund that? And what are the risks that will keep you from achieving that? Those risks may be inflation related or volatility in the stock market or healthcare costs or tax increases. And what are some things we can do to offset those risks or guard against them and create more living for ourselves in retirement, more income, so that we can live longer and meet all of those needs? So we've got a process, the 6 steps to retirement confidence, that we take people through. And we're happy to do the beginning analysis on that income to age 100 without even any obligation on the part of all of our listeners. The only thing you need to do is you need to have saved at least $250,000 because the process requires that to really make it work. If you've got at least $250,000 or more, well, then you give us a call at 417-200-3500, and you tell the people who answer the phone, hey, I'd like to meet with Barry and talk about one of those retirement income analysis. And we'll set up for you to have a meeting with me or one of our advisors. We'll analyze where you are, and we'll help you start mapping out a strategy to get where you want to go so that hopefully you have income to last all the way to 100 and you can achieve the big dreams, the things that you've wanted to do in that dream retirement. We want to help you make sure that you don't end up outliving your money. And the first step to make that happen is to give us a call at the Wealth Care Corporation. The number is 417-200-3500.
That's right. 417-200-3500 to get the ball rolling and get that appointment with Barry and the crew at the Wealth Care Corporation. I want to mention about December and the year gone by and our great Drury College grad, Bob Barker, who almost made it to 100. Barry, you talk about you can do it. You can live to be 100. And we mentioned before, Bob got as close to being 100 without going over. But we've, especially with his birthday, December the 12th, just before Christmas, Bob almost made it to 100. So it is possible. On to our next thing. So we've talked about nearly 70% of Americans are missing any written financial plan. Barry thinks that number's more like 95%. Here's another one, Barry. 57% of people have never talked to a financial planner about retiring. People without a plan, they're less confident. How do you get started? Get more confidence through your planning. On the show today, we're going through that retirement checklist to help you get a handle on it. Barry, one of the income boxes on our checklist is about Social Security. And how do I determine when I should start taking my Social Security benefits? What's the formula for that if you have one?
Well, there is no perfect formula, Ralph. We'll know when you die when we should have started taking Social Security. That's the way it works. When we get to the end, we'll know where we really should have started. But here's what the options are. You can take Social Security as early as age 62. Or you can take it at full retirement age. And for anybody born after 1960, that is age 67. Or you can take it at age 70. And FRA, full retirement age, is the hinge point. So if you take it earlier than that, if you take it back at 62, you're going to get about 1/3 less in your Social Security check. And if you wait past full retirement age to age 70, you're going to get about 24% more in your Social Security check. And so there are a number of things that come into play here. One is how much income will your spouse have if you should die early? Because if in the case of a husband who has had a homemaking wife who perhaps didn't have as much income as he did, and many cases fall into that category, though not all of them, well, it may be that he wants to delay till 70 so his Social Security is as large as possible because upon his death, his wife will start getting his check. And we want his check to be as large as possible. So that's a way to analyze it. There are other resources that come into play, though. You know, how much have you got in IRAs that are being forced out with required minimum distributions? What do you have in Roth IRAs that provide tax-free money? What income tax bracket are you in? All of this plays into the story. And so the only way really to figure it out is to do what we call a Social Security claiming analysis. It's a big mathematical calculator, a piece of software that we have that takes your specific Social Security situation, plugs all the numbers numbers in, and it runs it out, and it says, okay, here is the optimal time for you to choose to make Social Security claiming decisions. And we're glad to provide that as a free service to our listeners here on Watts on Wealth.
Great. Well, for me, I retired and started taking Social Security at 68 and a half. And Barry, I'm getting real close to a year and a half since then, almost real close to 70. And that was the perfect decision. I think we hit the sweet spot there for me, 68 and a half. With Social Security, we're tempted to make a quick decision based on our age. Talk about why, when we decide to do that, really needs some very careful thought.
Well, you do need careful thought because Social Security is probably your biggest asset. I can't do the math fast enough in my head, but if you just stop and think about the amount of check you're receiving from Social Security every month, and then back your way into, if you were earning 4% on your investments, how big would the pile of money have to be to send you that check every month? It begins to be a big number. In some cases, a high 6-figure or maybe even a 7-figure number. We're talking about over $1 million in asset that you need to manage there. And so when you think about Social Security, if you've worked 40 hours a week for 40 years, you've paid 76,000 hours into Social Security. And if you spent 76,000 hours accumulating something, you probably ought to spend more than 15 minutes figuring out how to start spending that. And that's why this Social Security analysis is so important. And we're happy to provide that to folks through the Wealthcare Corporation.
Hey, Barry's phone number, once again, if you're just joining us, and I hope you can stay with us for the whole hour. If you're just kind of here and there and everywhere, mention that number again for Barry, 417-200-3500 to contact the Wealthcare Corporation. And if you are out and about this morning, don't go very far. In the next few minutes, we're going to have our Social Security question of the day for you. Aside from income out of Social Security, a big part of the pillar of the income coming in, we need to understand how we're taking income from those other different accounts possibly impact our taxes. Now, that's another box, Barry, we need to be able to check off on our retirement checklist we're discussing today. So what might we need to think about when it comes to taking money out of those other different accounts?
Well, you do need to know each of your individual income streams, how will they be taxed? I'm stunned at the number of people who have no idea they could ever pay tax on Social Security.
And they're different. The accounts are different, correct?
Well, yes, every type of account that you take money out will be different. But the point is you need to know each one. Will it be taxed? And then people don't even realize that how those things are taxed actually determine how they wind up paying the surtax on Medicare, which everyone pays. Here's a little example of a question I would ask is, which of your accounts should you draw from first? You've got your IRA, her IRA, his and hers. You've got his and hers Roth accounts. You've got a joint account. You've got the money that she inherited from her mother and your money you inherited from your uncle. And the two of you together sold that piece of ground and you got a few $100,000 from that. All these different accounts. Which one should you spend first? And does it matter? Does it matter? Oh, it does matter. It does matter. Let me just ask you this. If you have one account that's earning 4% and one account earning 6%, which should you take from first? The 4%er because it's not earning as much, or the 6%er because it's providing more that could be withdrawn as income? By the way, there's not a right answer to that. It's not a simple question, and that's the whole point. You have to have a retirement income plan that takes into account the totality of all the different accounts you have, all the different income streams you have, and that builds you a tax-sensitive retirement income plan to make certain that your money lasts all the way until you're 100 years old.
All righty. Hey, you're listening to Watts on Wealth, the radio home of the main retirement designer, the Wealthcare Corporation, Barry Watts. This is your host, Ralph Hipp. Time for a break here. It's halftime. We're going to bring out the marching band, Barry, and have a little entertainment. No, not really, but we'll be back with the second half of our show, and we'll start off with our Social Security question of the day. You're listening to Watts on Wealth, and we shall return right after this break.
We all want the freedom to do the things that make us happy, especially in retirement. To get help planning for a future in retirement, give Barry a call today at 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500. More Watts on Wealth coming up. Welcome back to Watts on Wealth with Barry Watts of Wealthcare. For more information on today's topics, or to schedule an appointment to have Barry and his team go to work on your retirement plan, call 417-200-3500.
Well, hope you enjoyed the little halftime break here. We are back with the second half of Watts on Wealth. Hi, this is Ralph Hipp along with J. Barry Watts of the Wealthcare Corporation. And when we come back from the halftime break, Barry, we have our Social Security question of the day. And here it is. If somebody fails to apply for Social Security, for whatever reason they do that, can they go back retroactively and apply for and receive back pay for the benefits they list? We heard about a guy who was 80, never applied for Social Security at all. So can they go back? Can he go back in time?
Somebody should have been paying attention because he certainly missed an opportunity there for at least 10 years.
80.
But the good news is, yes, you can go back, but you're limited in terms of how far you can go back. In fact, you can only go back 6 months to claim retroactive benefits. Now, the current average benefit paid out of Social Security is a little over $1,700 a month. So for the average person, 6 months would be a little over $10,000 in back pay that they could receive. Now, my dad, Big Jim Watts down in Republic, would say, well, that sure beats a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And he's right, it does. So to the 80-year-old guy, I'd say, hey, go back and get your 6 months worth. There's $10,000 coming to you, but there's 9 years and 6 months worth that you didn't get. That's right at $100,000 that 80-year-old person would have given up if he were on the average pay scale for Social Security. So you can go back. You can collect retroactively to a maximum amount of 6 months.
All right. Good to know. And we always have our question of the day for you on the Barry Watts program. We're going to go back to our discussion of your retirement checklist for 2024. You know, you've got that year-end stuff. You hopefully took care of all that. Looking ahead now. And the next question, Barry, what are some of the ways that you help people around the Ozarks avoid making any mistakes or missteps when it comes to taking money out of their retirement accounts?
Well, Ralph, the rule is eyes wide open. Eyes wide open. You've got to be paying attention. And I find it interesting. Some people just wring their hands and worry themselves to death. That's not the proper way. And some people don't worry a bit, and maybe they ought to a little bit. What I would say to you is easiest isn't always the best. There's the first rule. So just because that's the easiest answer doesn't make it the best answer. And least taxable isn't always the best. Sometimes most taxable is the best answer, depending on your personal situation. So you just have to do an analysis on all the income sources, the taxability of the income sources, and the impact of those income sources on your tax bracket, on your Social Security, on your Medicare, in order to know what is the best way for you. There's not one rule that fits everybody, Ralph.
Okay. Also, what are some of the ways we can really get a handle on things? You've got the taxes and your fees and penalties you might have to pay, the possible potential impact on our retirement.
Well, you simply can never learn too much, although I think for some people they may learn more than they really wanted to know. The big thing, though, is as you learn about this, and people are all the time telling me, well, I'm going to study this. I've just got to study some more. Okay, well, what are you going to study? Well, I don't know. Well, what are you going to do with it when you study? Well, I don't know. Well, how are you going to know when you've studied enough? Well, I don't know that either. So it's really hard to get a handle on all this stuff and keep it straight. So my suggestion, Ralph, is that you need to work with a professional retirement planner. Now, retirement planning is what we do at the Wealthcare Corporation. You don't have to work with us. You can work with somebody else, but you need to be sure that it's not just somebody who sells investments, because just because they sell investments doesn't make them a retirement professional. In fact, it makes them an investment salesperson. And one of the ways to kind of sniff that out is to ask this question: are they paid a fee by the consumer, you, or do they earn a commission paid from the investment sponsor? And that will be an insightful piece of information that will begin helping you sniff out whether you have that person that is the correct one for you. And I'd just ask the question, tell me, what are your credentials in retirement planning? Tell me what you do in retirement planning, and they'll pivot and start talking to you about investment management. And if they do that, it tells you it's the wrong person.
Right. Hey, that's good to know. So ask if they're paid a fee or do they earn a commission. Good to know that. And Barry, I would rather, like with our radio show, I'd rather sit and listen to you. I can sit at your knee and learn from the master instead of going on the computer and trying to, just search for Google topics about investments and learn from people like you. And I'd rather do it that way. So, hey,
I'd always rather have an expert.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, if you'd rather have an expert, boy, Barry's a great one. And he's 417-200-3500. Fidelity tells us those, we're going to talk about RMDs now, Barry. Those required minimum distributions are an important part of our retirement plans. They come with very strict rules on the timing, when those distributions need to be taken out, and the formula that's age-based telling you the amount you have to take out. And we're hearing 73. You got to do an RMD at 73. An RMD is different for everybody, though, and you don't want to have those steep penalties or possibly higher taxes that leave you with just a portion, just a fraction of the money you were counting on counting for retirement.
Well, Ralph, not everybody has to take the RMD at 73. For example, me, I'm 60. My RMD won't kick in until age 75.
Okay.
But there are some people who had their RMDs kick in at 70 and a half. So all of this changed with Secure Act 2.0.
You got a window of opportunity.
Yeah, so they moved the goalpost on us is what they did. And the other thing that you need to be aware of is if you have to make a required minimum distribution and you fail to do so, you will have a penalty assessed against you in addition to any taxes that you're going to pay. And the penalty prior to Secure Act 2.0 was 50% of whatever you were supposed to withdraw. So think about this. If you're supposed to take $10,000 out of your IRA account and you forget to do it, well, if you're in the 30% tax bracket, $10,000 is going to be what? $3,000 worth of taxes? But because you forgot to do it, you also, in the old days, had to pay a 50% penalty. So 50% of $10,000 is $5,000. Then add the taxes. Now we're at $8,000 out of $10,000 had to be paid back to the IRS. So you only got $2,000 out of your $10,000 distribution. Now, thankfully, the rules have changed on that. And no longer is it a 50% penalty. Now it's only a 25% penalty. But in that same $10,000 example, if you fail to make the distribution in a timely way, you pay a $2,500 penalty for doing that. And if you were in the 30% tax bracket, again, you're going to pay $3,000 in taxes. So 55% of your distribution winds up going back to the government. There's no reason to allow that to happen, all because you missed your RMDs. You need to be working with a firm that'll help you to be sure that you don't miss your RMD and the timing of those things. Now, be aware, even if you get the timing right, your required minimum distributions can push you into a higher tax bracket. It can cause you to have higher taxes on your Social Security benefits, or in some cases, to have to pay tax on your Social Security benefits, and it can cause you to pay more from Medicare. And so all of these things add up and they begin to cause your savings account to shrink because of the withdrawal and tax that you're paying and the penalties that you're paying. And so what we'd like to do is help people sort their way through that. And we do that at the Wealth Care Corporation by just telling folks to give us a call. If you've saved at least $250,000 for retirement, call 417-200-3500. And we'll help you create a retirement income plan that includes a strategy for taking distributions from your accounts to help ensure that your retirement savings last as long as you do. And for something like that, we don't charge a fee. There's no cost or obligation. We don't know for certain that we can help you. And so we offer that up free to the listeners of our show because oftentimes we're able to begin helping them and show them ways that we can make a difference in their life. But we don't know about that until we run these first few analyses. So give us a call, 417-200-3500, and we'll take care of you.
All right. Type that in your phone and your contacts and have that number handy if you'd like to connect with Barry. Research is showing 70% of us grown-ups who are 65 and older are going to have some kind of long-term care and to pay for that. You definitely need to be able to check healthcare and long-term care planning boxes on your retirement checklist. As Barry, the U.S. Administration on Aging tells us, we Americans will spend a little over $475 billion yearly on long-term care. A plan to cover possible long-term care obviously needs to go on our retirement checklist. So as we move to that part of it and, further on in life here, what are some of the options for talking over potential long-term healthcare costs?
Well, Ralph, there are really just 5 ways to pay for long-term care. First of all, you can self-fund. That means you just write a check for it. And if you've got enough money to do that, good for you. But you need to realize that that's going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 a month, 12 months a year. And by the time you do that for most men who will be in long-term care for about 36 months, about 3 years, ladies, you'll be in there for about 5 years, we very quickly eat up something north of $500,000 in self-funding. And so even if you can afford to self-fund, there may be a less expensive way to do it, paying that fee with pennies on the dollar. And that's an important thing for you to consider. Now, if you don't have enough money to self-fund, then your next choice is to lean on your kids. And we'll talk in a moment about whether we think that's really the best idea or not. But you can just begin thinking yourself, do I want to lean on my kids for long-term care? The third way that you can do it is go on welfare, because that's what Medicaid is. Medicaid is the government-sponsored welfare program for people to get health care who don't have any other way to get health care. And there are people who are very proud, who would never depend on the government to take care of them, who are eager to get their Medicaid. And I'm just telling you, Medicaid's not probably the way you want your care to be provided for. And you probably don't really intend to go on welfare like that in most cases. The fourth way you can do it is you can use long-term care insurance, but it's gotten so expensive, hardly anybody can afford to buy it anymore. And it's got a provision in it called use it or lose it. So if you're lucky enough to die in the dark of night in your sleep and never have to go into long-term care, well, then all the money that you paid into long-term care insurance just evaporates and you don't get that back for your family. So a method that we like to recommend, and I don't know if it fits for our listener because I don't know their situation, but I'll tell you the situation for me and what I use personally is I actually use life insurance with an accelerated death benefit. You know, we all hate life insurance. And the reason we hate it is first because it's misnamed. It's not life insurance, it's death insurance. You don't get paid till you die. Who's the knucklehead who called it life insurance? Well, I want to suggest to you that there is death insurance, but there's also something called life insurance, and that is an insurance policy that actually pays benefits while you are living. In this case, it accelerates the death benefits to pay for your long-term care costs, and it does so on a tax-free basis. We do a lot of that kind of work in our practice. Our clients love it, and it's something that I personally use. I'm a big believer in life insurance with accelerated death benefits to pay long-term care costs, and it's one of the things that you certainly should be looking at as you look at the different ways to pay for your own long-term care costs.
And good to know that from Barry Watts. We have more of our retirement checklist to go through, and don't miss the final portion of our show. A lot to get to right after this.
According to the U.S. debt clock, in the time you hear this commercial, our nation's debt will go up by $1.5 million. That's more than $2 billion a day. Right now, our debt is over $31 trillion and climbing fast. The question is, how do we pay it off? One of the most likely answers is increasing taxes. Now think about your retirement accounts. Do you want to pay taxes on some of that money now when rates are historically low, or later when rates are potentially higher? Whether you should pay taxes now or in retirement depends on a lot of things. Barry Watts and the team at WealthCare know what to look for. Barry can help you create a plan so your retirement is as tax efficient as possible. Call 417-200-3500 to set up a tax strategy session with Barry Watts and the WealthCare team. That's 417-200-3500. When taxes go up, will you be ready? Call now, 417-200-3500.
Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Hey, welcome back in. The show is Watts on Wealth, and along with J. Barry Watts, the main retirement designer of the WealthCare Corporation of Springfield, I'm your host, Ralph Hipp. We're going over that retirement checklist, especially for 2024, making sure you're getting your ducks in a row and getting those boxes checked off. For people who check the long-term care box we just discussed, Barry, because they plan to have the kids provide care, we said one of those things was leaning on your kids for this. What would you say to them? Let's let the kids have us help with that.
Well, have you checked with your kids about that?
Have you asked them about it? Yeah.
Yeah, because that might not be the best idea. And even if your kids said, sure, yeah, you can count on us, we'll take care of that. Well, are the kids capable of backing up that statement? Look at your kids and ask this question. If your kids, your daughter or son-in-law and your child had to take care of you, what would be the impact on their marriage? Can they stand it? Because it can be very stressful to take care of someone. You know, Ralph, I just came out of surgery a couple of weeks ago this morning. In fact, about this time, I was totally snowed about this time a couple of weeks ago because they had me on some really good drugs and they had my shoulder numbed up. I couldn't feel a thing. But my wife, who is a nurse, for about the first 48 hours had to do everything for me because I couldn't even operate the recliner and make it lean back. I couldn't reach down and pull the lever.
That is a knockout punch. Yeah.
She had to take care of everything for me. And I saw stress on her as she was having to do that. And imagine how stressful it'd be on your kids to have to do that. Even if you're in a long-term care facility, somebody has to advocate for you. And so the question is, can your kids do it? And is it fair to your kids to ask them to do that for you? So this, depending on the kids to take care of it thing, I'm not against that. I think it should be that way, probably, but I just know how our culture is organized, and I'm not sure it'll be best in most situations.
Right. Barry, when is it typically the best time to start discussing long-term care coverage? When do we start to do that?
Well, earlier is better. I already talked to my kids in their 20s about it, my own children. And we kind of have the beginnings of something in place that will help them for that. And in the office this week, I had a fellow in the office. He's an engineer here in Springfield, owns an engineering firm. He's 43 years old, and he makes a pretty good nickel. And in his case, we were talking about long-term care. It was his birthday when he was in the office. And on his 43rd birthday, we were talking about long-term care. So I would say certainly before you retire, you need to be thinking long-term care and planning for that. And the sweet spot probably for doing something about it is going to be anywhere from your late 40s up to about age 60 is the perfect sweet spot. Up to probably 68, it's doable. You can do it after that. It's just not going to be as effective if you wait until you're 70 years old or older.
All right. Now, aside from the long-term care coverage and the cost of that, we also need to know what's going on with our Medicare coverage for retirement. How do you handle care questions with the people who come into your office?
Well, Medicare, my goodness, you talk about confusing. What a mess the government has created there. And I could rail on that for a long time and feel quite justified in doing so. But the simple fact is our job is just to help people sort it out and figure out what works best for them. And what works best for your neighbor and what works best for you will be two totally different things because your situations are likely very different. We have a full-time Medicare expert on our staff at the Wealth Care Corporation who helps our clients deal with nothing but the Medicare questions, and helps them answer their questions, figure out what they've got, determine which kind of Medicare policy will be best for them. Because, there is Medicare Advantage and there is Medicare Supplements, and they're very different policies. And so he helps them sort through what will be best for them, what will be most economical for them, and helps them get the kind of Medicare protection that is most suitable for their personal situation. We're happy to help people with that because it's a part of retiring. It's a part of those 6 steps in the retirement confidence staircase that we specialize in at the Wealth Care Corporation.
All right. Hey, that number again is 417-200-3500 to reach out to Barry Watts. The average 65-year-old couple, according to Fidelity, retiring today, might need around $315,000 after taxes covering any health care expenses when they retire. So a couple more things on our checklist, Barry. Maxing out your health savings account, your HSA contributions, if that applies to you, and having a plan for major medical insurance coverage prior to Medicare.
Well, it's important to have a plan for dealing with your HSA if you have an HSA, and I hope you do. Now, in order to qualify, you've got to have a high deductible health plan. More and more of us are getting those because you can't afford any of the others. What's qualified as high deductible is a deductible of $1,600 per person or $3,200 for a family. And so if your deductible is that or more, you have the high deductible health plan, and then you are qualified for a health savings account. Now, the amount of money that you can contribute to a health savings account for a husband and wife together, if they're over 55 years old, is $9,300 a year. And that $9,300 goes right into your health savings account. And I just treat it like a big Roth IRA. All the growth that's going to happen on that account in the future will basically be at a tax-free rate. And I know somewhere in the future, Kelly and I are going to spend $9,300 on healthcare. And so we're just sacking that up over in an account where we'll eventually spend that for healthcare costs. But you have to be aware of this. Once you're enrolled in Medicare, you can't contribute any longer to your HSA account. So you have a window of time prior to turning 65 when you're qualified to contribute to an HSA, and you ought to max that out if you at all can.
All right. Well, another thing, Barry, every year we got more than 500,000 Americans who file for bankruptcy, largely because of their medical bills. And a healthcare emergency, any catastrophe or illness, an accident can really knock you off your feet physically and financially. So let's discuss bankruptcy as part of the overall picture.
Well, Ralph, I couldn't help but notice that you said can knock you off your feet physically because, I had that surgery. Did I mention I had surgery?
Well, I was thinking of you when I said that.
The doc said, he did the surgery on a Thursday and he said, you'll be good to go back to work on Monday. Well, That was a mistake.
That didn't work out that way.
I should have waited until Monday, a week later, to go back to work, because I did come back to work. I didn't miss an appointment. I did everything I was supposed to do, but it was hard. It was labor. And so when you mentioned it can knock you off your feet physically, well, it sure as the world did. Now, it didn't have any financial effect on us, but imagine how something far more serious could have that effect on you. And your life savings could erode away if you don't have a strategy in place to help protect your money and your family from financial threats, one of which is skyrocketing healthcare costs. And that's not going to get any cheaper in the future. Nobody expects that the surgery I had 2 weeks ago is going to be cheaper surgery in 20 years. It's going to continue to go up. And while Medicare will be there for you in some form, already we know Medicare doesn't cover everything. There are out-of-pocket healthcare costs that can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over your retirement that Medicare doesn't cover. And that's why we want to help you create a strategy, because one of the steps in the 6 steps to retirement confidence is to help protect your retirement income from your risks, but also to protect you from the risks of skyrocketing healthcare costs. So you need to know what your options are for healthcare coverage in retirement and learn about the options for long-term care coverage for yourself and for your spouse if you're married. And you need to find ways to plan to pay for those healthcare costs so you don't have to choose between taking the vacation, being able to spoil your grandkids, and paying for your doctor bills. Because otherwise, a major illness, a car accident, those are the things that can sink your ship in retirement. And this is just the reality that we have to all face. What I want to invite you to do is call us at the Wealth Care Corporation today, and we'll talk about some of the ways that we can help you create a financial strategy to protect your lifestyle and your livelihood and your family from outrageous healthcare costs. Just pick up the phone and dial 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500 and say, I want to talk with an advisor about protecting myself from healthcare costs, and we'll get that process started for you at the Wealth Care Corporation.
Absolutely. It's a call you cannot afford to make in 2024, folks, and get in touch with Barry and his expert crew. None of us are promised tomorrow, and that's why it's so important for you to get a plan in place for your healthcare needs, all those other needs today. The Wealth Care Corporation in Springfield at 417-200-3500, and wattswealth.com is Barry's website. Barry, I'd like to open up the mailbag for a question or two before we get to the end of the show here. Would you like to answer a question or two for us?
I love answering questions from our listeners.
Let's do that. Here's our first question right out of the mailbag. I've been looking forward to retiring for years, but now that I'm less than 2 years away from my target date, I'm starting to panic. Is that normal? It's almost, I'm thinking like you're getting married. You have cold feet, but is this normal? Do other people get cold feet about retirement too? And how can I shake this off so I can really enjoy myself?
Well, it's absolutely normal. Over half of people who can retire don't. They keep on working, and I think it's because they're not confident. And that's why our 6-step process is the 6 steps to retirement confidence, because when the time comes that you should retire and you want to retire, but you're fearful, we want to take that fear away by helping you know confidently you can pull the trigger because you have protected yourself against the things that might be a problem to you later on in retirement. And the only way I know to deal with that, Ralph, is to go through this process. Otherwise, you're just guessing in the dark.
Okay, and another one is we have some friends who were struggling because the husband was in a debilitating car wreck. We discussed a catastrophic accident, and they weren't ready to live on his wife's paycheck. They don't know if he'll recover to work again. Now my wife and I are wanting to make sure we'll be okay if something happens to one of us. So where do we start on that?
Well, I think the first question you need to ask is if something happens to one of you and doesn't kill you, it just disables you, do you have something to make up for the lost income? Do you have disability income protection in place?
Big question.
And then if you should die, of course, there can be the premature loss of your paycheck due to death, or even the loss of pension or Social Security due to death. And so all of these things have to be factored in. And so the way we do it is we build a plan based on being healthy and living all the way to age 100. Income to age 100. And then we take that plan and we say, now let's stress it with an early death at 68. Let's stress it with a health crisis at 75. Let's stress it with economic crisis like interest rates and inflation and recession. And let's see how the plan responds under stress. And then we'll know whether or not you've got a plan that you should be confident in and able to step out into retirement with.
All right. Well, Barry, thanks a lot for your advice and getting together for the hour. We've learned a lot. And any final thoughts before we wrap it up here today?
Ralph, I'll see you on the radio next week.
We will do that. And come and join us, folks, for Watts on Wealth. I'm Ralph Hipp. Have a great financial new year.
Thank you for stopping by Watts on Wealth. If you would like Barry and his team to help you make a plan to get to and through retirement, or would simply like a second opinion on your current plan, give us a call today at 417-200-3500. That's 417-200-3500. And join us again next week for Watts on Wealth.
WealthCare Corporation provides tax strategy, tax compliance, accounting, and insurance services through its affiliate American Tax Strategies, LLC. Investment advisory services are provided by WealthCare Asset Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance never guarantees future results. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be used as the basis for personal financial decisions without first consulting a qualified advisor. The information and opinions you've heard are believed reliable but cannot be guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness.